Good morning. This is John Carroll, CEO and founder of the Service Council, welcoming you to today's inService podcast event. A little earlier than typical, so it is truly a good morning for your East Coasters that are joining us. For you West Coasters that are joining us, it's really early morning, but good afternoon to some of our broader audience joining us overseas. Welcome to today's inService podcast event. Really excited about today's discussion around sustainable supply chains. This is a triumvirate today, so I'll introduce our guests in just a moment. But before I do, I want to just talk a little bit about the importance of this topic of sustainability, because we at the Service Council believe sustainability is among the most important topics of our generation, right? It's a wide-reaching topic, and today we'll dive specifically into the area of building the case for sustainable supply chains. And a quick note: if this is also important to your organization, today's podcast serves as a precursor to a workshop we're going to be hosting at one of our member organizations in the greater Dallas area, Denton, Texas, to be specific, Tetra Pak. Special thanks to Sasha Ilyakin and Fabio Raffone of Tetra Pak, who are our hosts. We'll have somewhere between 30 and 50 of our critical members joining us in the discussion, and really excited for that event, which is coming quickly, December 10th. Again, sustainability, real important to us. We're trying to build a platform for a continuum of discussion. And this discussion and topic has become popular and has been popular for a long time. And it became really popular in business in the 1980s. And I remember when I was in grade school, and I'm not going to do when I used to walk uphill, no shoes and socks in blizzard, both way uphill to school. But what I'm telling you is that I remember the introduction of the 3 R's concept back in school, right? The reuse, reduce, reuse, and recycle. And I'm sure, like many of you, I was part of things like Odyssey of the Mind and other different scholastic programs, and we actually did a program around this concept of 3 blind mice, and we walked around on hands and knees and did a recycling tour around a facility, and we actually took the first prize in that contest. So that was my crowning achievement in my scholastic career. But the topic of recycling and sustainable practices, it's just been building and building for many decades now. And organizations started to begin adopting sustainability to show their commitment all the way back in the 80s, even further, right? And public companies are starting to more prominently report on sustainable efforts and what is their footprint, and how are they reducing their footprint, and how are they pushing towards the concept of the United Nations establishing the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which happened back in 2015, and how can we do our part in building a more sustainable Earth, right? And that these trends, there are some trends that rise and fall, and sustainability has been here, and it's been rising and rising and rising. An example of one that has fallen recently, that we're a little bit troubled by, is diversity, right? Diversity was this really popular topic. And when you frame out sustainability more broadly speaking, helping less fortunate communities is part of sustainable practices, by the way. But we want to do our part in creating a platform to make this not fall and rise. And so really excited about doing that. And because of some of these trends that have risen and fallen, the concept of greenwashing has introduced itself into the picture in sustainable practices. And that's the organizations claiming that their approach to sustainable practices is better than what they're actually practicing. And we're going to talk about a little bit of that. We're going to talk about how in service, there's some critical challenges that are encountered, like rushed parts placement and distribution, insourcing and nearshoring instead of, offshoring and outsourcing. There's some things that we can do to get more predictive in our approach so that we're eliminating some of these practices that might be wasteful. And so we're going to talk about a lot of these things throughout the course of today's discussion. And I am so incredibly pleased to be welcomed by my colleague, Gerardo Pelayo, whom a lot of people know at this point, Vice President of Research and Advisory, but our esteemed guest, Professor Arzum Akkas, who joins us from the UMass. And thank you very much for joining us today, Arzum. And why don't we start with an introduction to yourself, a little bit about your background, and a get to know you.
Thank you very much, John. It's my pleasure to be here. My name is Arzum Akkas. I'm an associate professor at University of Massachusetts, Amherst. I'm at the Eisenberg School of Management in the Operations and Information Management Department. Prior to joining UMass, I taught at Boston University for 8 years, again at their business school, Customer School of Business. And prior to that, I was at MIT doing my Ph.D. In engineering systems. I've been in supply chain management for 25 years. I am a practitioner turned academic. I came to the PhD program at MIT with 8 years of industry experience. Most notably, I worked at PepsiCo's headquarters in New York. I was part of their supply chain management team. I also did management consulting at an operations strategy firm. My first job out of college, it was in Istanbul, Turkey. I worked at a software company which provided solutions of ERP systems, supply chain optimization systems, periodic maintenance systems, and so on. So I've been in this field for quite some time, 25 years. At UMass, I teach 3 different courses. One is our core operations management course for the MBA students. I also teach an elective for our graduate students in supply chain management. And I also, it's a new course, teach sustainable supply chains that's offered to both graduate and undergraduate students. My research focuses on sustainable operations. In particular, I work in a really niche area, food waste. It used to be actually more niche. Now it's becoming more common. We see like more researchers working on this important topic every day. So yeah, my research focus is food supply chains and food waste in particular.
Outstanding. Yeah, and I think the connection of MIT with Gerardo, I think that's what brought this all together. So thank you,
Exactly. We
Gerardo.
met
Yeah.
at MIT back in 2016, right, Gerardo?
More like 2008, 2009.
Oh my God.
Feels like yesterday, I know. We haven't changed one bit.
Time flies. Time flies. Well, I got to tell you, featuring guests like yourself that have such a wide-reaching experience on a topic is so important for our community to learn from. So we look forward to sharing with our audience, some of the things you've learned along that path, which is really impressive. And I'm going to turn things over to Gerardo. I will be reacting throughout the course of today's discussion and maybe offering some viewpoints of my own. Gerardo, I'll turn things over to you to lead us through the discussion.
Excellent. Thank you, John. And Arzum, thank you for joining us today. It's truly a pleasure to have you. And you started bringing up the course that you're teaching around this topic, and I would say that's a positive signal about the interest in sustainability and how it applies to supply chain coming up, raising the bar, if you will. But a course is not going to change the world by itself. So, from your perspective, from your experience, do you see a true rise in the level of interest for key decision makers on their attention to sustainability? Is that growing, going down? Has it remained stagnant?
Absolutely, it's growing, and I think it's here to stay. I'm going to share a data which I think you used in your podcast advertisement, a line from my syllabus, which is in 2011, only 20% of SAP 500 companies had sustainability reports. In just over 10 years, this number increased to 96%. It's a huge, huge momentum. I think what is driving this is several things. Some people may think that it's driven by consumers. I think it is less compared to the push from the finance industry, from investors and from activist investors. So there has been a momentum, and I think it's gonna here to stay.
Gerardo, I was looking at the supply chain state of the market report from last year, and one of the things that shocked me. Well, first of all, sustainability. When we asked the question amongst our service audience, our service executive leadership, how important, what are the biggest challenges you're facing? How are you addressing some of those greatest challenges? in terms of priorities and what are the major parts of your business focus moving forward. And we heard things like solving the visibility across the supply chain, creating agility, deriving profits from spare parts and service parts and supply chains. Sustainability was quite far down the list, and it was more so from the lens of regulatory compliance versus truly enacting a practice of sustainable practice, right? So that was one of the shocking revelations from last year's data set. And then the other thing that was a little bit shocking was the biggest challenge currently faced by the organization. Regulatory challenges was quite far down the list, right? It was about 22% of our responded pool. So I think there's an area of opportunity to make this a more critical priority for our service audience. So I think it's certainly of the top of their mindset, but there's some other competing priorities, as we all can appreciate. So those are some of the data points that I would stress. Yeah.
Can I say a few words about this?
Yeah, please.
Actually, sustainability is very much related to visibility and agility. So because of the extreme weather events that we are having, it's causing disruptions in the supply chain. So it is related to agility, having shocks in the supply chain and visibility. For instance, if you don't know your upstream supply chain well, you may face a scandal, right? And it may scandal about as one of your extended suppliers doing something not favorable for the environment, and it can impact your reputation. And one solution to that is certification, right? So to give an example, Nestle, for instance, Greenpeace came up with a video in 2011 around the time when Nestle was having annual shareholder meetings. Mm-hmm. And the problem was they use palm oil in their products, and like many CPG companies do. And palm oil is associated with deforestation. And Greenpeace created these videos, like an office worker eating a Kit Kat that is turning into like a gorilla's finger because gorillas are being burned down because of the forest being burned down. So that created bad reputation for Nestle, and then they took caution immediately, and they started using certified palm oil. Same situation happened with PepsiCo. I think it was in 2015. There was another protest from another NGO, again criticizing them for using a lot of palm oil, which is tied to deforestation. Again, PepsiCo followed the same route and started using certified palm oil. So, but how does the certification happen? You need to understand the supply chain that leads to this certification. And it's very much related to visibility and traceability in the supply chain using a certified product, because the certification process is also vulnerable to issues like, for instance, IKEA. Again, another sourcing scandal or bad reputation related to IKEA products. They use wood from Romania, from Russia, Ukraine. Like there's illegal logging going on. There is tapping into ancient forests. So that also uncovered by NGOs. Again, reputation issue. And they started using, again, certified wood. But again, it was found out that the certification process is not solid. They're certified illegal logged wood. So again, these reputation risks are related to sustainability and visibility in the supply chain. So when we talk about sustainability, oftentimes the first thing that people think of is like emissions or complying with environmental laws, but it's like much bigger than that. So when I teach the topic in my course, I started with making a business case for sustainability. And I really like the framework that's used in Yossi Sheffi's book, which is Balancing Green. Yossi Sheffi is our supply chain guru from MIT. Gerardo knows him well. So I liked how he presented it. So basically, he uses the word eco-efficiency, which means, but by the way, so the whole business case that comes down to 3 areas. One is efficiency, the other is risk management, and the third is growth. And he calls each of these eco efficiency, eco risk, and eco segmentation or eco growth. What does that mean? Efficiency is, by its definition, creating the maximum amount of output by using minimum amount of input, right? So when it comes to sustainability, we're talking about use of resources. So if you use less water, if you use less energy, if you use less electricity, it's going to save you money. So that's a reason to invest in sustainability, because it's going to save you money. And a second reason is eco-risk. It is risk management that is related to the environment. And there are two types of risks. One is risk coming from climate change. Like, for instance, think about cocoa or coffee. So these are locally produced commodities, and due to climate change and the changing temperatures, they are under threat. The supply is under threat. I'm going to quote the CEO of a frozen food company based in the UK. They sell frozen fish sticks. And he said, if there's no fish sticks to sell. So you need to be careful about the supply and the risks to your supply, which is driven by climate change. So this is another reason why you should invest in sustainability for risk management purposes. And there's the other type of risk. One is supply risk, and the other is reputational risk. And I already gave examples about this. Somebody finding out something that you are doing or your extended suppliers are doing, or the product that is causing at the use phase. It doesn't have to be the issue doesn't have to happen within your own walls. It can happen in upstream supply chain, downstream supply chain, and to save your reputation, that's another to invest in sustainability. And the third reason is eco growth or eco segmentation. There is a part of the consumer market that is green consumers, and there is a demand for green products. And if you want to grow your company, that's another reason to invest in this segment.
I think
sustainability is not just about complying with regulations. It is much broader. It's about saving money. It's about supply chain visibility. It's about managing risk in terms of supply and managing risk in terms of your reputation.
Yeah, you bring up some great points, some great examples, and I think there is a consumer loyalty being driven by some of these practices as well, right? That consumers are voting with their wallets, businesses are voting with their wallets on organizations that are building sustainable practices and approaches in terms of sourcing and throughput of goods and services in a responsible manner. So I think you nailed it. Gerardo, back to you.
Yes, and so that framework that you provided, Arzum, I think it's very important to have at the front end because it helps us organize. But I also want to avoid that sometimes we want to cover too much ground, and we're so eager to get the voice out there that then we lose some of that clarity. So let's tackle each one of these each one at a time. You brought up the eco efficiency, eco risk, eco growth, and before that we were talking about greenwashing and the fact of when we want to build a business case for sustainability, we need to be able to measure it in some ways. And perhaps that is part of the bridge that is missing between those initiatives and the intent of publishing a sustainability report on an annual basis versus having an actual impact. So are there any measurable outcomes, KPIs that you would say organizations would do well to link to their improved sustainability efforts?
I mean, there are some common measurements, and there are measurements that vary across different industries, right? Like the most common measurement is like the emissions, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, kind of like what are your emissions. And for instance, from the beverage industry, water efficiency is a big one. Coca-Cola and Pepsi, they measure how much water they use per liter of their products. By the way, do you guys want to take a guess? Like how many liters of water do you need to produce 1 liter of Pepsi? Any guesses?
I would say a half of a liter.
But it's a 1 liter of Pepsi, so it needs to be like more than 1 liter.
Oh, excuse me. Okay. We'll go with 1 liter, 1 to 1.
Okay, 1 to 1. So you say it's 2 liters per 1 liter of Pepsi. So
Correct.
1 additional liter. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's a good guess. So I think like 20 years ago, they started with 2.7 liters.
Wow.
And now they're down to 1.78, according to their, yeah. So your guess is pretty close, but it's something that's on a downward trend, right? Water efficiency is a really very relevant metric for a beverage company and for any company actually that uses that relies on water for in their production process. In food, for instance, you need it not only to put as an ingredient in the product, but to clean the lines. For cooling, for heating. So water efficiency is definitely one, but how do you measure it for different types of products? I guess it makes sense the way that they do it for Coca-Cola and Pepsi, but I don't know how, it may vary. I guess per unit of product that you're producing, that would be a measure. Waste is another very important measure, but it's often not disclosed by companies, and it is very much related to your productivity and efficiency too. Like for instance, Tesla, right? It's often included in ESG funds, a green company, but how much waste they generate, do they disclose it? So oftentimes companies don't disclose it because it's very much related to their financial performance too. So companies only disclose what they feel comfortable disclosing and something that they have a grip on, that they feel confident reducing it over time. So otherwise they'll choose not to disclose it.
Yep.
So when I talk about environmental impact in my class, I talk about like a 3 dimension. One is the air impact, water impact, and land or soil impact. And so the air impact is not just limited to emissions. It's about also the pollution part, right? For instance, nuclear energy is good for emissions, but it's not good for pollution. Yeah, go ahead, Gerardo.
So before we go down that other topic, because I want to put enough attention on that environmental impact out of the house, taking a step back, one of the areas of concern to me is that while there are these different metrics and you were calling them out, they do not seem to be at the top of the priority list just yet. Even though the reports are coming out to provide a data point, we currently have our 2025 KPIs and metrics survey in the market, and we ask service leaders there to prioritize their focus areas. And one of the new questions that we introduced is, where are you expecting your investments in people, in process, in data and technology to be reflected? People and process, we've got 0 responses. They'll be primarily impacting sustainability metrics. Data and technology, less than 5% of the data. I think it will be primarily impacting that. So we could measure all we want, but if the business decisions are not focused on driving improvements on the metrics that are associated with sustainability, chances are that we're not truly going to make a lot of progress. We struggle to connect the dots between those investments and the efforts and the priorities for the organization, the society at large, relative to what we're actually achieving.
Gerardo, I just want to bring up a point, because you just struck something with me that I think is really interesting. Because Arzum, when we're talking about best practices and services, we're constantly talking about how can you be efficient in service delivery, and oftentimes, assets that are more complex, they require a field technician to be dispatched to go out and resolve that issue, and there's fuel wastage, and if you're not efficient in that process, right, if you don't dispatch appropriately by a number of different sort of levers, right, sometimes it's the skill set requirement that's missed, sometimes it's parts weren't accurately forecasted for the particular scenario that's being encountered, and that causes repeat visits, and it causes erosion of a critical metric amongst our audience, which is first time fix rate. And what I hear a lot is that the metrics that we're currently after as service leaders and as a service community are actually causal in nature to erosion or achievement of sustainable practices. And I feel like there is an effort to sort of weave the metrics that are common among service businesses into the sustainable metrics that need to be measured. So it's just I just want to make that observation. I think
Yeah.
it's kind of an interesting one, kind of like a network of causal
Yeah.
metrics to the metrics that are important from a sustainability perspective. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So I don't think that sustainability metrics and cost metrics are mutually exclusive. There's a lot of overlap between the two. And so for like efficiency, right? A lot of cost and efficiency metrics, productivity metrics are definitely closely related to sustainability also.
Yeah.
But and I understand that, like for profit organizations, their number one goal is to grow and drive profit. So maybe, unless sustainability is in their mission or is a very high priority for them, like, or they want to be like counted as in ESG funds or things like that, they have like high level goals and aspirations, it's not going to be at the top of their list, and it may stay as a just a merely checkbox for them. And the two reasons is that because it is a secondary priority compared to financial metrics, and also they may not be aware that the two metrics are closely related to each other. And so I'm curious, if you do a survey, what will be the sustainability metrics that you would use? How would you measure sustainability? I wonder what people would answer. Maybe there is not a lot of understanding about what it means to measure sustainability. And actually, among the companies who are considered at at the top of their game, even among them, they use different metrics and different reporting standards. And there's a lot of reporting standards out there, by the way, and there are initiatives to consolidate them. I feel like we, as a field in operations, by the way, the word of sustainable operations, it will be redundant to say sustainable operations. In the future, all operations will have to be sustainable. We are headed in that direction. But I feel like we need better standards. Like how I often think about how the whole world of APEX came out, right? American Production and Inventory Control Society. During the 70s, so people were using different terms for various like practices, and the whole council established standards so that everybody uses the same language. Like when you say an SKU, stock keeping unit, everybody knows what an SKU is. Everybody knows what the fill rate is. Everybody knows what MRP is, right? Everybody calls it MRP. Everybody calls it bill of materials or recipe. So we all speak the same language, and it all came out with APEX and the SCORE model, which again, like Yossi Sheffi, I need to ask Yossi Sheffi some commission from advertising his book like this. But I think I really like how it was structured. So he talked about, again, sustainability from a supply chain view, within your own walls, upstream supply chain, downstream supply chain. That's the SCORE model. And the SCORE model includes, like what are you going to call what? The terms, definitions, the metrics. So how we're going to measure various performance metrics. I feel like we need a similar thing for sustainability. And there are initiatives, actually, like there are standards, reporting standards. But again, if you look at like IKEA's sustainability report versus Apple's sustainability report, you won't see like
There's some variance.
lot of exactly, there is variance.
Yeah.
What I do in my class, it's a really interesting exercise. I ask students in groups to pick a competitor from the same industry. And because I teach what it means to reduce environmental impact throughout the whole supply chain, I ask them to rate these companies, give them like an ESG score. And they compare Dunkin' Donuts with Starbucks versus like two car companies, like two companies, same industry. And then they compare, they evaluate them in terms of air, water, land, and give them a score. And so they also present what they measure, what KPIs they use, and what KPIs they don't use, and what is it that they are hiding, what is their sense of, like, to what extent this company is greenwashing, to what extent this company is just checking the box versus like really committed and measuring the right things and making good improvements over time. So it's a super fun and interesting exercise that I do in class. But
I'd love to see some of those excerpts. That would be great for our audience, by the way.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can share them with you, but yeah, we can talk about it later. Yeah.
Back
so
to you,
yeah,
Gerardo.
coming to your point about like what do we measure about sustainability, what makes sense to measure. First of all, resource efficiency and eco-efficiency is closely related to cost, right? Like, and so they shouldn't be excluded from sustainability. And in addition, there is additional measures, but it varies across industries. And to answer your question, why it is not at the top of their list. Like when you do research, you ask them, is supply chain risk management at the top of your list? They will often say no, but when they face a risk, a crisis, a scandal, a disruption, it's something they will have to, deal with later. So it's similar, like it should be in their list.
Yeah.
Why is it not in their list? Lack of awareness, lack of knowledge about how to tackle the problem, how to go about it. What do you do beyond just checking the box? So yeah, that's my guesses. So what are your thoughts about your clients? Like, why do you think that it's not?
I think it's naivety, but I'll let you comment. Yeah.
Yep. So
naivety, not in a negative way. Naivety in a way that they need to be informed a little bit better on how to link their practices to sustainable approaches, and what are the standard frameworks by which they need to report on that are important to their client, that are important, for visibility's sake. But Gerardo, I'd love your viewpoints as well.
Yes, and I'll start by addressing Arzum's question. It's not often that we get asked the question during the podcast. But you said, what are some of the KPIs that service leaders are using? And it happens to be one of the questions in the survey. And the top 3 in the list are energy consumption, waste generation, and material efficiency. Another interesting thing is not just the list itself, which maps to many of the themes that you've been talking about, but that 2/3 of the organizations are thinking about improving these metrics, while a third is more in the I want to stabilize my performance along this metrics. So there's a variety of where they are in their journey, and a variety of coverage. It's very even among these 3. And one of these signals that I see as very positive is that compliance with environmental standards is number 4. I like that it's not number 1. That
maybe they're already feeling that they're compliant and there's not much room to improve. That may be the reason. Otherwise, it's like a ticking bomb, right? If you're not complying and you don't care about it, it's a ticking bomb. It's gonna explode anytime. Maybe, I don't know, I'm just guessing, maybe they already feel confident about it.
It could be. My hypothesis is when you're already achieving benefits that transcend what you're obliged to do, what you have to do because somebody's checking over your shoulder, then that compliance element becomes an afterthought a little bit. So it's not the main driver. It's not what we're trying to achieve. It's a byproduct of the way that we're thinking about the business. And that is why I like not seeing it in number 1, because there's other things that organizations are thinking about for why sustainability aligns with the rest of their business model. And I think that's when you ask for then the other part of my point of view, or of what puts us in the right direction, it's thinking of sustainable business models and sustainable supply chains should not imply building another silo that is well staffed and has its own technology and has its own initiatives, but rather a mindset that is embedded in the rest of the decisions in the organization. And that's where I would like to see when organizations are thinking about their investments, their next year plans, that the impact on sustainability metrics becomes a key factor in their decision making.
Gerardo, I'm going to ask you another question, actually. How many, so a big part of getting predictive and proactive in service supply chains is enabled by technologies, right? Technology investments that drive visibility, access to data, assimilation of data that allows an organization to predict and proactively support customers and assets in a way that's efficient, right? So that we're not rush shipping parts because we misdiagnosed or, something else. I'm curious what percentage of total cost of ownership or ROI justification on technology investments have sustainability impact within them, embedded in them, like the true sustainability metrics. Curious what your viewpoints are.
I think there's a correlation, and there's an intuition that connection exists. But if we were to ask 10 different service leaders how strong is that connection, we'll probably get 10 different answers.
Yeah.
And can I add something?
Please.
Yeah, related to my food research and food waste, how technology is related, right? Like to give you an example from retailers. They use technology to better date check their products. For perishable products, retailers need to check the dates pretty much every day to see like if anything is expiring, right? So an inefficient way to do it is to use labor to check everything every day. A better way to do check dates is use AI and tools that will compute the highest probability of expiration items and direct your labor towards them, because labor is scarce and expensive in retailing. So that's a good example of use of technology to better utilize your labor. It's good for efficiency and productivity. And it's there's a direct link to waste metric, right? So this is an example of like investing in technology that it will produce positive outcomes for sustainability in the end.
Yep. So, absolutely. And to complete the swing, I would say the problem is not that the connection is strong or just growing. The problem is that we don't know. And when we don't know, then it's very hard to justify investments along first time fix and how they're going to help from a sustainability perspective, because we don't have an explicit connection of how one metric connects to the other. And now you have decision makers within the organization that are pushing in different directions, and they do not need to be doing so. First time fix improvements. So one of the topics that I want to bring up and get your point of view actually on Arzum is sustainable sourcing. This is, as John introduced at the top of the podcast, we are seeing that the importance of partnerships in the supply chain is growing. We see a variety of strategies on the rise, outsourcing, nearshoring some of the components. And when we ask what is driving that, we hear the agility, reliability of the suppliers, resiliency, costs is a factor in the equation. But the environmental impact and the sustainability of the supply chain as a whole is not yet coming across at the top there. So from your experience, Arzum, are there any best practices, any guardrails that organizations should be aware of as they're thinking about their sourcing strategy, so that sustainable sourcing is a core part of the conversation?
I mean, sustainable sourcing is part of your supply chain management strategy, and we have the same 3 reasons to invest in sustainability when it comes to sourcing too, right? Like efficiency, eco-efficiency, eco-risk, eco-growth. Maybe in sourcing, it's more about eco-risk because you want to work with suppliers. That's not gonna cause you a reputational trouble, right? That's why you should carefully think about that. Maybe use certified products. That's one of the solutions. The most basic one is work with suppliers that's gonna stick with your code of conduct and do audits in the supply chain. So it's all about risk management. And also, eco growth. If you develop a product that you claim to be better for the environment, the product design comes with what materials and ingredients you're going to use that product, and that is also related to using like a green product versus a regular product as a material, and it's again related to your sourcing strategy. So the same 3 reasons that applies to investing in supply in sustainability applies to it's part of your sourcing is part of your operations, and it's tied to these 3 pillars again. And I want to say a few more words about risk management. Risk is oftentimes hard to measure, right? Like, so it's easy to measure revenue, right? It's obvious. Cost, but how do you measure risk, and how do you justify investment in risk? So, like, for instance, investing in sustainability must be thought of investing in risk. Like how, for instance, like you buy insurance. Why? Because it's going to cover you for future damage from flood or fire and so on. Similarly, you invest in sustainability to manage risk. It should be thought about that way. So I want to give an example from how PepsiCo handled it. Before that, actually, so I want to say a few more words about eco-efficiency. So I use like a really good case study in my class to cover this issue. It's about a Walmart distribution center that's going to open up in Canada, and they want it to be a very green distribution center. What are the options? So should they, for instance, use LED lighting or regular lighting? Should they invest in wind turbines? Should you use like a rainwater collection system and so on? So for each of these initiatives, what we do is I teach students capital budgeting tools. How do you calculate the NPV or internal rate of return or the payback period, right? So for any kind of eco-efficiency initiative, we can pretty much generalize it. It will most likely cost you extra money to begin with, initial investment, but it's gonna save you money down the future. So that's how you calculate the NPV of this investment, for IRR of this investment, payback period of this investment. But if we think of this, again, I'm gonna link it to the PepsiCo's approach. So you have all these initiatives that want a piece of your pie. That's your budget, right? So how do you allocate budget across various initiatives? How do you prioritize them? So these tools are definitely, like you use these tools. What is the IRR of this investment and so on? So what PepsiCo's previous CEO, Indra Nooyi, utilized was, so she almost had like a sustainability budget, like a grant. So if you have a green initiative that where the IRR metric maybe doesn't look outstanding, and it's competing with some other type of initiative, you can apply for this grant, and the grant is allocated to various green initiatives, and so that their numbers look better during the capital allocation process. So I thought that was like a really brilliant way of. So you basically allocate money. So you justify it to, for my risk management, I allocate for sustainability. It's a strategic investment area for me. I allocate this much budget. And there are these efficiency initiatives they can apply to get a piece of this budget. And every potential initiative is going to compete, and they will be evaluated according to their return on their investment. And that's how we will do our annual operating plan or investments for the near future. So
that is a great point. Yeah, and because part of what you're describing there is, how do you communicate your approach to sustainability and the incentives that you set up in this case, that's the internal communication. It can certainly move the needle of where the focus is, and we look into employee engagement as part of our research for field service engineers, for contact center agents. One of the insights that has been most interesting is about 65-70%, depending on the year, of employees say, I have incentives to innovate. But then when we ask, do you have enough time to innovate? Do you have the right resources? That percentage gets cut by about half. So having the intent is great. Providing the resources and aligning the objectives, the KPIs to that is also very, very important. And I want to connect it as we get into the last third of the podcast to two final points. And the first is this concept of uptime as a service. John asked earlier, how do we connect the operational outcomes that we're seeing to sustainability impact? I believe this is the strongest case, or the one that is trending the fastest. When we say uptime as a service, it's this idea of leveraging the data that we have about the equipment and its live performance, all the telematics, along with the engineering data that we have with the SLAs, with the behavioral elements about the customers that are utilizing those assets. And instead of, like with a car, taking it to maintenance every 5,000 miles or every 6 months, which may be too early or too late, you actually take it to the shop when you need to. You take it early enough, and you may prevent a catastrophic failure that could be more expensive and worse off from a material usage perspective. You take it too late, you take it too late, and you're in that situation. You take it too early, and you're unnecessarily reducing the useful life of some of these components, and therefore increasing the usage of material. Do you see, Arzum, this connection being part of the mindset of your students, of the leaders in the industry that you get a chance to talk to, of how strong initiatives like uptime as a service, driven by commercial incentives, is also having an impact directly on the proper use of materials and in the supply chain?
So I guess you're talking about smart, proactive, periodic maintenance of your assets.
Yes, getting
I see
into
a
that
link.
predictive, proactive maintenance, exactly.
Yeah, like for instance, to give you an example from the food industry, I've heard from retailers that refrigeration failures is a significant driver of food waste, because when you have a refrigeration failure, you need to discard those items after so many time. So if you can get better maintenance schemes for these assets, then it's going to reduce your waste. So again, investing in this type of technology is about any kind of investment decision, right? Like you need to, again, think about like a triangle. What is the revenue effect? What is the cost effect? And what is the risk? The other part of the equation is risk. And any kind of investment decision, right? If you want to invest that kind of technology, what are the benefits? And in addition to the risk, like what are the additional benefits? Like what is the sustainability effect? So other things that you cannot directly quantify, you can list them under the risk category, and that's additional information for you to consider when you're making investment decisions.
And the other opportunities that I see, just to supplement that point of view, is perhaps the usage of materials in the field is the most visible example. But supply chain, we know it's about managing that risk. And you have inventory because you don't know exactly what's going to get consumed and where is it going to get consumed at which time. The more we can get into that predictive mode, then the more efficient the supply chain itself can be, safety stocks come down, your inventory levels
Mm-hmm.
come down, your transshipments and that carbon footprint also comes down. And all of these are a little bit of invisible benefits to efficiency, and I think we would do well bringing them to the surface, because it is part of the ROI that you were mentioning, from investing in this type of technologies, investing in the data foundation that will enable this type of practices, because it really helps far beyond the four walls of an organization.
Gerardo, I just want to make a point. I think that there's, you know, there's a balancing act that needs to be struck with executives that are leading organizations in terms of some of these approaches between social and corporate responsibility, right? Corporate responsibility is, Arzum, what you're talking about, cost and revenue, right? There's a lot of emphasis from service businesses for contribution to profit. Manufacturing, especially manufacturing industries, they're suffering product margin shrinkage, and so oftentimes service becomes that profit lever that helps them sustain their corporate growth, if you will. And so there's that side of it, but on the other side of it is, how do we do this socially responsible, right? And sometimes those two things can be adversarial, and so we have to think about, how do we find and strike a positive balance where both can thrive? And I think
I think if you look at it from risk management perspective, they're not oftentimes adversarial. And first that, and second, so we initially talk about like how the number of companies who do sustainability reporting has been on a rise, increasing.
Yep.
What is driving it? I think companies started to see sustainability is a matter of risk.
Yep.
Matter of like risk for their supply, risk for their, like, for instance, profits. Okay, profit, but profit for next quarter, next year, the following year. We also need to think about the volatility of the profit. Like, you don't want this profit to go up and down at all. Like, we got struck by a weather event or supply chain disruption. That's why, like, we perform really poorly this semester. Like, companies are also interested in reducing variation of the profit across time. That's again about like a risk management subject, right?
Sure.
So I think the lens, that I think that's what has changed the mindset of companies. That's the reason behind more companies joining the sustainability train.
Yeah.
Because they increasingly see this as a matter of risk. I think that's what's driving investors push on this, right? They see it as a risk of future earnings. That's why they're pushing the companies to do this.
I couldn't agree more. I'm a full supporter of it. I think it's incredibly important. But I'll tell you, time and time again, we're hearing manufacturers that are moving and shifting to this as a service methodology. Oftentimes, the profit of their organization is based upon asset performance, meaning asset uptime. So that asset needs to be operating. It's oftentimes the lifeblood of revenue production. And so they'll take practices and approaches where they might shortchange that material usage, to your point, Gerardo, earlier, and replace the component more quickly than they perhaps need to for performance-related reasons, so that revenue doesn't stall and revenue isn't affected negatively. So that's the notion that I'm making here, is that there has to be something found in the middle here, where these two things one doesn't have to suffer for the other to thrive, right? And I think that's the magical point.
Anyway, sustainability is a very broad thing, right? So we need to talk about initiative by initiative, and that's why that framework is helpful. If you talk about eco-efficiency, it's something by its very definition. It's something that's going to help you save money, period.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it requires a little bit of investment upfront, and the question is, how often is it going to pay back? If it's going to pay back in 5 years, that's a good investment. If it's going to pay back in 30 years, that may not be a good investment for you right now.
Sure.
But if you're talking about like a specific product that you claim it to be a sustainable product, then it may require a more expensive raw material, right? So then that's a decision that you're going to have to make. Like, how are you going to price it? Do I target that consumer segment? Does it make sense for me to invest in this product line? So it's tied to your strategy. You have like a business strategy. You need to think about like what market you serve and how you're going to serve this market, and also sustainability strategy. Everything, all the business decision, all the operations decisions cascades down from that high level strategy, right? Like first you start with a sustainability strategy, then everything is cascaded down to the organization.
Yep.
This has been enlightening. Gerardo, any viewpoints from your side of things?
Yes, and you said sustainability is a massive topic. We could be doing this on a daily basis, and we still wouldn't be able to cover it. There's two pieces that I want to leave as food for thought for the audience, and Arzum, if you want to react or share some final thoughts after that for a quick minute or so. But the first topic is this friction by design, and we inService very often, as customer expectations keep rising, keep evolving, we talk about a frictionless experience. And it is important to sometimes step back and ask ourselves, can a little bit of friction in the right places be better off for everybody? The example in retail is when, because of cart abandonment, they were trying to minimize the friction in the buying process, and there were more sales, and initially say, oh, that's great. But now the number of returns also spiked. And that doesn't help revenue. It doesn't help sustainability. It doesn't help with planning. So inserting some elements in the buying process to make sure the address is correct, to make sure you're getting the right size, to make sure you have the right view of the product that you're acquiring, are ways in which friction is being inserted, and is a thought that we may want to include as we're reimagining the customer experience as a whole in inService. The other point that I want to make is, John talked about corporate and social responsibility. Very interesting data point in MIT Sloan published this year, where organizations that were excelling in their social responsibility goals, social responsibility performance, they were also excelling in terms of their resilience. And the explanation was because they understand the different incentives, competing incentives of all the stakeholders, then they have this knowledge at the tip of their hands, and they're in a much better position to react when something comes out of left field. So just two quick thoughts, Arzum, if you have any reactions to that, or if there's any other topic that you'd like to leave the audience with before we wrap it up.
Just wanna say a few things about friction. Yeah, I agree with you. And my favorite example about that is from Amazon, right? So oftentimes you're so impatient, you want the item like, next day immediately, but by default, they put it to the delivery option of, combining orders, you get fewer boxes. So it's a little bit of friction. If you want it so quickly, so bad, you need to click on this other button to get it sooner. That's like a very slight friction, but I'm guessing it's helping Amazon save gas and mileage and delivery cost and packaging cost, and it's good for the environment. I guess that's the most impactful example. By the way, so about the textile industry, there's a lot of returns, and Amazon too. Apparently, I read it somewhere, 12% of everything returned is discarded. That's a huge, huge number. I'm not sure if they mentioned this in their sustainability report, but friction. I don't know how they can implement friction without sacrificing their revenue in this case, but some friction may be needed so that customers think twice about like whether they really need this product, so that it doesn't have to be returned with this huge cost for the environment.
Absolutely, some great viewpoints there. I would just close with a last viewpoint, Gerardo, that I think that there is an opportunity for an adversary for the elimination of an adversarial relationship, excuse me, between sustainable approaches and corporate benefit. I think that you make the great point of that data point that suggests that those that are more sustainable in practice are achieving better results, greater resiliency, and I think where our community is lacking is in telling the story in the appropriate manner. I think that a lot of the metrics that we're tracking and tracing and a lot of the things that we're doing by practice are sustainable in practice, right? The whole approach to getting predictive and proactive, it does eliminate waste. It does reduce footprint. It does reduce fuel wastage and all the things that we're talking about that are important. But telling that story into an integrated network of, this is our corporate footprint, I think is perhaps behind a little bit in terms of maturity. So those are my viewpoints. I think there's some growth opportunity here. Arzum, this has been fantastic. We have got to have you back again. This has been great. Back to you,
Thank
Gerardo.
you, John. By the way,
Yeah.
if you more thoughts about that, I think a lot of companies are working on sustainability whether they know it or not, because reducing cost and eliminating waste is about sustainability. They just need to communicate it better with their, sustainability reports and frame it as, they can take a positive framing on it and present to the consumers or the investors that this is the sustainability impact of our cost savings. Everybody would
Yep.
love to hear that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Gerardo?
And so Arzum sustainability is going to be driven by people. And so I want to close at learning about Arzum the person. Is there something that you'd like to share with us, just a personal passion project, something that you're looking forward to as we're wrapping up the year?
Project?
Yeah, just
Sure. I'm just wrapping up
learning
a
something about
fantastic
you.
research. Okay, let me tell you about that. So it's been commissioned by ECR Retail Laws based in Europe. It's a nonprofit organization work with retailers to help them eliminate waste, reduce waste and food waste. So I interviewed about 20 retailers from everywhere you can imagine, like Australia, South Africa, Europe, UK, US. And my goal was to understand how they exit surplus food. Their options are they can do markdowns, they can repurpose, animal feed donation, recycling, anaerobic digestion, and landfill. So that report is being wrapped up now, and it will come out soon. I think it will be super helpful for the food industry. I'm super excited about this report and the research that I finished up. So that has been like my latest thing that I've been working on. So that's what I wanted to share with you.
It's outstanding.
Great.
Outstanding. Gerardo, I don't know if you'd agree, but we have to welcome Arzum back in some capacity. I don't know when and how, but we'll come back to you, Arzum, because this has been very enlightening. I'm sure our community is just impassioned by some of the discussion points you brought today. I think it was fantastic.
It was my pleasure, John. Thank you so much. I would love to come back.
To our listening audience, thank you for joining us. We will see you on the next podcast, and this will be available for archive and consumption. Please visit our website, our social channels. You can find it on YouTube and whatever podcast platform you subscribe to. It'll be there as well. Thank you so much for joining us today, and have a great day. Take care.